Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'd like to welcome you. My name is Professor Robert Destro. I am the Director of the Interdisciplinary Program in Law and Religion here at Catholic University Law School. And on behalf of Dean Dan Attridge, the faculty, and the students here, we'd like to cordially welcome you to this 25th anniversary commemoration of the massacres at Haladja. I'd like to have a special welcome here today for the survivors. We're honored to have you and humbled that you would join us this morning. I'd like to recognize each of you in turn. Ms. Narmeen Kamal Jalal, Nako Mohammed Salek, Aras Akrim, Hoshiar Omar Abdullah, and Fakhruddin Salim Yusuf. Thank you so much for coming. And to all of you, our honored guests. Now, I'm going to do one logistical thing quickly. For any of you who have to get up and go out for any reasons, it's probably just easy to go out the back. That way, you don't get noticed too much. And more importantly, where the bathrooms are, which is right here near the elevator. There's other ones down through the atrium to the right of the library. Yes.
Forgive me for that, I was saying before. Temple University is recording this. If nobody wants to be in the visual imagery, to move over to the left. Somebody does not want to be.
Okay.
We're going to use this in public.
Yes, very good. So if you don't want to be in the...
To the right. Which side do you want from? That side? Over to our right.
Yes, to this side of the room.
Okay.
Is there anybody that doesn't want to? So, like everybody.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you again. Now, as you can see, I'll give you just a quick thumbnail. We're honored to have you here. We have been honored to be working with the people of the Kurdistan region since 2011. As you can see from the poster we have here, these are the martyrs of the Christian community in Iraq. And so since 2011, we have been involved in the Kurdistan region in what we call the Kurdistan Religious Freedom Project. And the goal has been to build bridges between the Christian, Muslim, and Jewish communities here in the United States with their counterparts in the Kurdistan region. We've done some very interesting work with the website. Hopefully will be going live in the first part of April that describes the mapping and the census we've been doing, as well as giving you some pictures of the Christian delegations that we've sent over to meet their counterparts in the Kurdistan region. And so, as you might guess, religious liberty is a pretty important human rights issue for those of us here at Catholic University and around the world. And so we're grateful to everyone who has participated in that project, and we're very grateful for all of you to come here this morning to honor the survivors and commemorate the horrible atrocities that happened there. And what I'm going to do now is turn over the podium to our co-host, Najat Abdullah, who is the Director of Cultural and Community Affairs of the Kurdistan Regional Government of Iraq's representation here in the United States, for some welcoming comments. And then we're going to turn the podium over to Father Mark Morozovich, the Dean of our Theology School, for the first prayer for the dead this morning.
Thank you very much. I'll keep it short. We are 30 minutes behind. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 25th commemoration anniversary of the Haladja Genocide. We are so pleased to have you all here today. Your attendance to this show, it means how much you care about human rights, and also your eagerness to prevent any future crime against humanity and genocide. Unfortunately, we are here today to mark a dark and bloody day, 25 years later. The day should never took place from the beginning in the history of humankind. It was only 25 years ago when the town of Haladja, located in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, which was bombarded with chemical weapons. Haladja's chemical bombardment was part of the Greater Anfal campaign that lasted nearly 8 years, costing the lives of hundreds of thousands of people, of Kurds. We are so grateful and honored and pleased to have 5 survivors here today. They traveled nearly 7,000 miles to share their story with us. Additionally, would like to send my best regard, and also so grateful for Dr. Kelly from Curtin University School of Law. He's here with very tight schedule. Thank you very much for making this happen. And also, in addition, I would like to thank Vilma Roth, if I'm not mistaken, Vilma Roth from the Middle East Democracy Federation. Thanks very much. Before I leave the podium, I would like to thank our co-host and also our co-sponsor, the School of Law here in Catholic University, especially Professor Bob Destro and also Professor Marshall. They've been very good help for us as soon as we start to do this project. At this time, I would like to hand over to you, Mr. Bob. Thank you very much. Thanks again. Welcome.
Okay, I would like to now introduce the Dean of the Catholic School of Theology, the Very Reverend Mark Morozovich.
Thank you very much. And just for a moment before we begin in prayer today, I wanted to share with you that I am a Ukrainian Catholic priest. And as part of the Ukrainian Catholic Church, we know the suffering and the injustices that have occurred. And just recently in Kiev, we marked the anniversary of the needless massacre of Baba Yar. So this is something that is deeply felt by me, deeply felt, I think, across our human community. So I'd like to invite us all to prayer. I want to apologize, first of all, however, that I must depart immediately. My aunt died, and there's the viewing this afternoon in Pittsburgh, so I'm on my way to there. So please do keep her in your prayers as well. Heavenly Father, we come before you, and we ask you to be here with us today. We thank you for your great marvels, for the creation of our world, for the creation of humans, for how you have brought us into splendor and glory. We ask you, O Heavenly Father, to look upon us today. Look upon us who have gathered in memory of all of those who died. Look upon those who were needlessly murdered. Look upon the survivors. Look upon us who have gathered to remember the pain of sin. Bless our time together. Bless our way. Bless our actions, so that we, each of us, may strive to reflect your love and may build a world of peace and a world of love and a world of understanding. Send down your Spirit upon all of us. Amen.
All right, we're in, the next item on the program is the short film, so we'll get that started. Let me begin that. Hold on. Okay. Thank you to the filmmakers who made the film. Can we get our panelists up, please? Okay, where is that?
Hi, I'm Velma. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you as well.
Okay, Mike, do you want to go? Sure. Okay. All right, I'd like to introduce our first panelist this morning, Professor Michael Kelly. He's the Associate Dean at Creighton University School of Law and a leading expert on the Haladja Genocide. Mike, would you like to join us?
Thank you. Well, thanks to Bob and Marshall for hosting us at Catholic University. I'm a law professor at Creighton University, another Catholic law school in the Midwest. I came to research the Anfals and Haladja and the Kurdish genocide a bit by happenstance. I wrote a book in 2005 on the run-up to the Saddam Hussein trial in conjunction with the Slobodan Milosevic trial from an international criminal law perspective on trying sovereigns. And it was a well-received book. And as such, I was contracted by another press to do a book covering all 7 of the Saddam Hussein trials before the Iraqi Special Tribunal. And then, of course, you all know, during the second trial, he was executed. So my publisher called and said, well, what do you want to do now? And I said, well, let's just make it a book about the Kurds and the Kurdish genocide, because there really was no book or research in Western literature about that. Everyone vaguely knew what had happened. They may have even known the term Anfals. They may have distantly remembered the term Haladja, but they didn't know the full story. And my publisher agreed, let's do it. So we did. And then that book, Ghosts of Haladja, came out in 2008. And it really not only unpacked the history of the genocide, which you all know and which I won't bore you with today, but also the legal strategy that the prosecutors would have to take, have taken if they were to successfully prosecute Saddam Hussein for genocide. And then some of the defenses that he would have raised had the trial gone forward. So I basically unpacked the Anfal trials against Saddam as if he were there. And I tried, in my book at least, to give the Kurds the day in court that they did not get against him. And so we need to understand a little bit about the law of genocide. It was really, it's been with us forever as part of human nature. You know, back before World War I, genocide was just another war tactic. But the genocide of the Armenians by the Turks changed world opinion on that somewhat. And then, of course, and that was in the wake of World War I, or during World War I. And then, of course, the Holocaust in World War II really galvanized the international community that this can no longer happen, this needs to be a crime, people need to be held accountable for it. And so we had a definition, finally, for this terrible, terrible act. And the definition reads that genocide means any of the following acts committed with an intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group as such, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Clearly, Saddam Hussein was guilty on all 5 counts with respect to the Anfals and what he did to the Kurdish people. But from a lawyer's perspective, the elasticity of this definition is deceptive. While it could demonstrably be shown that almost all of these acts were committed by Saddam or his forces, judicial and legal authorities, both international and domestic, have interpreted that intent requirement for genocide to be specific intent rather than general intent. And so from a prosecutor standpoint, this is a much higher standard of proof to show that you specifically intended to destroy the group, not that the group was destroyed as a byproduct of something else that you intended to do. So this becomes a problem for the prosecutor, and it becomes a little bit of a gift for defense attorneys. Saddam Hussein was in the position of having to argue, to save himself, alternate intents, not the intent to commit genocide. And he had 2 alternate intents that he could argue. Again, these were made up, but he would have argued them had he survived to go through this trial. Saddam would argue that it was never his actual intent to destroy the Kurdish people. He would have said that his primary intent was to impose greater central control over the oil fields underlying traditionally populated Kurdish areas in the north. That would have been his first excuse. His second excuse would have been that he intended to combat Kurdish forces that may have been assisting Iran during the Iran-Iraq War. He would point to national security concerns associated with allowing a potentially breakaway population to remain in control of the country's largest oil reserves. And if you look at this map up here, you see those green dots where the oil is located. It's located in the Shiite areas in the south and the Kurdish areas in the north, especially around Kirkuk. And so, the geography of this, I think he would be able to point to a map and say, that's what I was protecting. I wasn't so concerned with killing Kurds. I just wanted to keep them under control. I wanted to move them out of Kirkuk. I wanted to Arabize the region. If they died, well, I'm sorry, but that was not my actual intent. And then, of course, the second argument would be that Iranian forces had crossed the border during the war. Some Kurds had helped them, and he was actually going after insurgents. This was a counterinsurgency operation. It wasn't genocide. The problem with that is that if you look at the geography of the Anfal campaigns, most of the Anfals that were undertaken up along the Turkish border, not the Iranian border, and his targets were civilians, not combatants. So that argument falls apart too. But these are the kinds of things that Saddam would have thrown up in defense at his trial. The levels of proof that would have been brought out to destroy these defensive arguments by Saddam would have been intercepted cables, documents that were captured not only by the Americans and Peter Galbraith, who was on site there on behalf of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee during that period, but also eyewitness testimony. And so, I think the credibility of the defense would have ultimately collapsed. In fact, I'm sure of it. Other defenses that Saddam would have raised against the prosecution of him for the Anfal genocides would be lack of knowledge, that this was just his commanders in the field that carried this out. This was al-Majid, this wasn't him, these were his troops. But that defense really would suffer under the command responsibility doctrine. The command responsibility doctrine is a doctrine that came out at the Nuremberg trials against Nazi leaders. And under that doctrine, you're responsible for the conduct of your troops. And if they commit atrocities, you committed the atrocity, even if you didn't fire the weapon yourself. He would also argue the sovereign immunity defense. And there was clear evidence that his defense attorneys were going down this road. The sovereign immunity defense is that you can't prosecute a sitting president, right? You have to wait until they're out of office. He would have argued that the American-led invasion of Iraq in 2003 was illegal under international law. And therefore, by extension, he was still legally the head of state. And so his attorneys would have tried to put the American invasion on trial instead of Saddam. Again, I think ultimately that would have failed. But you can see how this problem of intent, I think, is one that would have been very interesting during the Anfal trials. The other obvious evidence that comes out that prosecutors would be able to avail themselves of, and are the mass graves and the timing of the mass graves. And if I can advance this, we'll see if... Bob, do you just push the button here?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what.
Yeah, I tried doing
It
that.
didn't work. Here's the folder.
This one?
Yeah, that's the folder.
Oh, there's the Anfal's map. You can see where the attacks took place well inland from the front lines during the Iran-Iraq war. Obviously, that would cause his defense of fighting insurgents to crumble, and especially up around Dahuk. This map is actually in the pamphlet that you have today. This is a ceremony I attended in 2010, and some of you may have been there. This was the reinterment of 102 children that had been excavated from a mass grave located near Debis. The ceremony was held outside of Sham Shamal. Was anyone there at this event? It was an incredibly sad event, and you can see each of the small coffins getting ready for reinterment by the KRG honor guard. There's another shot of it. Obviously, evidence like this is irrefutable. What judge can buy the defense of a dictator like Saddam Hussein in the face of evidence like this? It's just too much to overcome. I was lucky to have been there, and I spoke at the event. I've been to Kurdistan several times. And what strikes me about the Kurdish people is that during my many travels to Kurdistan, they're such a resilient people. You are such a resilient people. You refuse to be repressed. You refuse to forget. Yeah.
These are Professor Kell. These are the survivors here, and then I have the translators here. So answer for now, then you can at least talk about it.
Sure. Sure.
I'm sorry, it just not.
Sure. How
It's really
does?
their day.
Yeah.
Could you just change places? I'm sorry, it's been closed. Just some of the main points.
Yeah, no, that's, we didn't realize that.
We do have a translator.
Good, I'm glad.
Yeah, well, I don't know that they're interested in the legal stuff, but. Sure, sure. Yeah, just to repeat very briefly, for the purposes of our translator, the trial of Saddam Hussein that did not take place, the Anfal's trial, because he was executed halfway through that trial, is one that I think has fascinated those of us in Western legal academia. And it's given us a chance to get some insight into some of the theories that would have been fought back and forth between prosecution and defense. The legal definitions, I think, have been more fully informed as a result of the Anfals being recognized as a genocide. I congratulate the British Parliament for recognizing the Anfals as genocide 2 weeks ago. I'm sure all of you heard about that. I hope that Congress follows suit. We forget that it was the American Senate that actually sent their researchers in to collect the evidence in the wake of the Anfals. So Congress, back in 1988, was on the front lines of this. They need to be reminded that they were there when it happened, and they've got a duty 25 years later to officially recognize this. And I think they can take their lead from the British Parliament. I'm not going to go through all the legal theories that I just unpacked because they're too complicated to go through and I can't reduce them to just one sentence. I'll leave it at that. I hope I'm still here. I have a flight to catch in about an hour and a half. So hopefully I'll be here at the end for questions. But just to sum up, I think that the genocide of the Kurdish people stands alongside the genocide of the Ukrainian people, as Father noted, the other genocides of the 20th century. They're all a matter of degree, but they're all seeking to achieve the same result. And you have populations of people, much like the Kurdish people, for those of you who are Kurds in this room, who have an indelible scar from that event. And you carry it with you as a population, and your collective memory is the repository for that. But you need to talk about it. You need to make people aware of it. It's one thing for Western academics like myself or Bob to talk about it, but it's another thing for you to talk about it. And so I would encourage you, don't be silent about what happened to you as a people. The world needs to know about it, especially the West needs to know about it, and it needs to constantly be in the minds of humanity. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. And as apropos of your closing comments, I now am honored to introduce Ali Mohammed Salek, who is one of our survivors, and he can talk certainly from the heart, from his own experience. Ali.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. First of all, I thank all of you for your attendance to the 25th anniversary of Haladja bombardment. And I want to thank the American soldiers who came to Iraq and liberate us from the dictatorial regime, and those who have died in Iraq, and we can see our freedom from their blood. Also, I want to thank Professor Bob and Mr. Najat and KRG office in Washington, D.C. for helping us to have this event happening today. First of all, I believe that a question that has been arising in the mind of some of you is that I am very young, and how could I be a survivor of Haladja bombardment that has been happened in 1988? During the bombardment, I was 3 months old. And Iranian soldiers took me and brought me to a city near to Afghanistan. And an Iranian family adopted me. And the Iranian family was a widow woman with 2 sons. And she took me, and I grew up there among the Iranian family. I grew up in this city which was far from Kurdistan, and I didn't have any connection with Kurdish people. I didn't know Kurdish. And I have just 2 problems. The first problem was that the Iranian government didn't give me Iranian nationality, and I didn't have citizenship in Iran. And the second problem was that I had many friends who had lost their fathers, but there were a difference between me and them. And the difference was that they had a picture of their father, but I didn't have any picture of my father. I didn't know who my family are. And when I was 17, I lost my Iranian mother, and I was alone. I lived there for 7 years alone in my Iranian mother's house. And I couldn't go to college. I couldn't get a job. I couldn't have a driver license to get a job. That's because I didn't have any nationality. I didn't have the Iraqi nationality and Iranian nationality. After 5 years of my Iranian mother death, I came back to Kurdistan. And there were 44 families who has lost their children. And all of them say that Ali is our children. And the sole way that I could find my real family was DNA test. And through a DNA test, I found my real mother. And after that, I realized that I have lost 4 of my brothers, my sister, and my father. Today, I am a student in the American University of Iraq. And I have a good life in Kurdistan. But still I have many psychological problems. We want the international community to recognize Haladja and Anfal as genocide. I have lost my family. The survivors of Haladja have lost their family. Their family will not come back to their life. But we don't want you and your children to have the same feeling in the future. We don't want the repetition of Haladja bombardment anywhere in the world. That's the main concern that we have. We don't want the repetition of the genocide in Kurdish community or in anywhere in the world. And I want to finish my speech with a quote of one of the survivors. We have suffered through a long winter's night, but we could always see a bright star of hope. Now, finally, a new day has dawned, and we look forward to living in the sun again. Thank you very much.
Sorry. Okay. I'd like to now turn the panel over to Dr. Sharouk Abbas, the President of the Kurdistan National Assembly in Syria.
Actually,
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, I'll clarify.
Okay, very good.
Shukr Abbas works with, or is the president of Kurdistan National Assembly of Syria. There is also a Kurdistan National Assembly for Iraq. Mr. Abbas works with a number of Kurdish individuals on both sides. He has asked me to speak today in his place. I am Executive Director of Middle East Democracy Federation and President of Independent Review. On the charitable side, I work with multiple ethnic groups. Right now our focus is on Iran and Syria. So Mr. Abbas's group is one of the entities that we work with on the Syrian side. Let's see, so just to kind of give a little background on who I am, since I'm kind of walking out of the shadow. Is this a little better? Okay, thank you. The Middle East Democracy Federation is an umbrella group that supports independent NGOs and ethnic voices in speaking out on their own behalf. We address human rights and international justice, democracy development, security, intelligence, independent media, coalition building, all the range of variables, the kinds of things that the State Department and other entities depend on ethnic individuals to represent themselves for, bring themselves into their offices so that they can bring greater justice in the world. On the consulting side, I'm very honored to work with two gentlemen who are very passionate in support of Kurds, have been to Kurdistan more times than I have. But my personal background is in criminal justice and mental health, and the two are very much a part of each other. At all levels of justice, there is nothing more healing than having someone speak out in your defense against your oppressor or against those who have butchered you or massacred your family and friends and compatriots. So for the Federation, our top priority for a number of ethnic groups is genocide. In any event, as part of my job in representing other people's voices, my comments today are not necessarily my own. Over the winter holidays, I spent 2 weeks in Kurdistan between Arbil, Dohuk, and Zahu, but I was invited to Suleimani and Koya. I was hosted by Iraqi Kurdish gentlemen who fought with the U.S. Army and U.S. Army Special Forces and recollected their personal experiences as we walked through the Syrian Kurdish refugee camp at Dohuk. Though on the other side from Haladja, the road between the mountains from Dohuk back to Arbil felt like death. It sounded like a somber hum of countless souls resonating between the hillsides, but I can't imagine what it would feel like in Haladja. In the course of mass human rights atrocities by dictatorships and extremist groups, it's imperative that a thorough brand of people's representatives and series of officials between nations advocate for the cause and bring an end through justice so that communities can recover and regrow their societies. It takes more than one. It takes 300 policymakers in America and then more overseas to achieve the means. I would like to acknowledge someone who I don't know personally, but who is a role model in the cause of genocide and reestablishing stability. Ambassador Peter Galbraith was one of the first to witness the genocide of the Kurds by the Iraqi government during a trip he made in the region in 1987. Here are his comments to CBC News in 2003. As we traveled from the Iraqi area to the Kurdish area, we were stunned to see that the villages were gone. These were places that had been inhabited for millennia. The graveyards were removed, the mosques, all the wire had been taken down from the electric poles. It had become a desolate region, and we could see where the people had been moved. Iraq called them victory cities, but in reality, they were a kind of concentration camp. Sometime later, Galbraith read a small news clipping about the gassing and concluded that he had earlier witnessed signs of mass genocide. It was a moment of recognition, and I put together the use of chemical weapons against villages far from the Iranian border in places that could have nothing to do with the Iran-Iraq war and put that together with the systemic destruction of villages that I'd seen before. The conclusion was that this regime was committing genocide, and I felt that we had to do something about it. I sat down and dictated, in about an hour, a bill to my secretary. I imposed every sanction on Iraq that I could think of. The legislation banned oil sales, required the U.S. to oppose loans, cut off $700 million in agricultural and export credits, and banned any export requiring a license. I drafted this and said, what should we call it? It was a moment of recognition. Oh, sorry. During the Reagan administration, pardon me, the Prevention of Genocide Act was introduced to punish Iraq for their chemical weapons attacks against the Kurds at Haladja. This legislation immediately won in the Senate, but lost in the House and was defeated under the White House pressure threat of veto. The bill was drafted by Ambassador Peter Galbraith, who was a staffer on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee from 1979-1993, when he became an ambassador under the Clinton administration. Here is Ambassador Galbraith's reflection on Haladja as published in the Boston Globe, 2002. The Reagan administration, which had been providing Iraq with $700 million a year in credit guarantees, saw Hussein's Iraq both as a potential security partner in the volatile Persian Gulf and as a promising market for American products and investment. Secretary of State George Shultz denounced Iraq's use of chemical weapons, but others in the administration seem more concerned about the Iraqi election should the sanctions become law. While past error is no indication of future action, the Kurds have not forgotten that Secretary of State Colin Powell, then the National Security Advisor who orchestrated Ronald Reagan's decision to give Hussein a pass for gassing the Kurds, Dick Cheney, a prominent Republican congressman and later vice president in the Bush administration leading Iran hawk, could have helped push the sanctions legislation, but did not. For this copy of the original legislation, I'm glad to share it or email it to anyone who would like a copy. This policy and the groundbreaking efforts that Washington did do was at least part of the inspiration that we did take in Iraq later on, in particular, with Colin Powell and Dick Cheney and President Bush W. II. In the Middle East, and victims of genocide around the world need more advocates like Ambassador Galbraith. There's a certain balance of global business development, economics, and corporate social responsibility. It's a large planet, over 190 countries to do business with. Any corporation should be able to find means to take a break while the local constituencies in a given foreign country seize the right to determine their own fate. At present, Assad's military complex and their chemical weapons are no secret. And Assad, Iran, and Hezbollah have plenty of active targets. Free Syrian Army, infiltrators consisting of Al-Qaeda and Taliban, Jandala, Israel and Turkey on the borders, they're all under regular threat. Reportedly from the ground, the Syrian Kurdish area is far more quiet. It's not as much a threat to Assad so far. Consider, however, that Iran trucks in 180 missiles or more, which can hold chemical warheads and be aimed in any direction, most likely at the greatest threats to Assad's regime, and inshallah, not against the Syrian Kurds. That said, the last remarks are from Mr. Abbas that he asked me to share with you. He says, my apology for not being here due to important events that are taking place at the moment and represent the interests of Syrian Kurds. I had to be at those critical events to ensure a brighter future for the Syrian Kurds. I would like to remind the audience that Syria is being ruled by the same Ba'ath Party like its sister in Iraq. The vision was to purify the Middle East from non-Arabs such as Kurds and Jews. Today, the Syrian Ba'ath regime waging wars on its own people like its sister in Iraq during Anfal and Haladja genocides. U.S. must stand with the Syrian people, support decentralized federal Syria, support regime change, and this will lead in stopping the ongoing civil sectarian wars that could undermine the interests of minorities such as Kurds and Christians very soon. All indications are leading in that direction. We need to avoid what happened in Haladja or in southern Kurdistan, where Kurds were slaughtered in front of the international community, where instead of helping Kurds, they ignored or supported the regime of Saddam. The Syrian oppositions mostly wanted the regime to change in a peaceful way. However, the violent regime supported by Iran and Hezbollah used violence on them for months, and then inaction by the international community and interference of non-Syrian infiltrators have caused more violence by promoting radical Islamists to hijack the Syrians' peaceful revolution. Today, the Syrian people on the ground are still the same who want freedom and democracy and are being forced to seek the protection of Islamist radicals because of inaction of international community and disproportionate use of force by the regime and its allies. We ask the international community to recognize Haladja genocide and press those companies who provided chemical weapons to Saddam and Iraqi government to compensate the people of Haladja. If they don't and look the other way, as they have thus far, this sends a message to the Syrian regime to use chemical weapons on his own people. I'm glad to provide these remarks in Kurdish or Arabic translation in if you give me a couple of weeks to work with the volunteer translator. Thank you.
All right, now we will have, if you have questions, we're more than happy to open up the floor to your questions. And I have a microphone, so if you just raise your hand if you have a question, I'll be more than happy to get it around. Thank you very much. Okay, so is there anybody who has any questions? Yes, we have one of our survivors has a question. Is it on?
I'd like to thank all of you for coming here today. Again, for coming, and you have come a long way. You only have seen a small portion of a bigger atrocity in Haladja today. The Anfal campaign was 100 times bigger than Haladja, but unfortunately the international community didn't realize that on time. And I hope that these pictures would put pressure on the governments around the area where the Kurds live to help recognize the Kurdish case as genocide so that it doesn't occur again against anybody. Now the new Iraqi army is standing right across from us, which might give the possibility of another atrocity to occur. We Kurds helped contribute to the Iraqi government and form the new Iraqi army. Those are the same people whom we helped to build, now standing against us. And I hope that each one of you can help his or her government understand the Kurdish case and help recognize it globally so that it doesn't happen again. And thank you.
Thank you.
Can we respond?
Yes, we have more questions back here. If I can just amplify his comments for just 1 minute, my experience is that not only is there a big story to tell, but most Americans really have no idea where Kurdistan is. And so part of the story is to tell people who you are, where you are, and what the future looks like, as well as the past. So that's one of the things we are trying to do here, and I want to emphasize what Professor Kelly said. It's important that you speak out. Okay, please.
Okay. My question is made of a few branches, and it is addressed to Professor Kelly, actually, who is expert on the genocide. And my name is George Rasool, by the way, and I'm a member of Iraqi Parliament on the change movement. And I studied and published a few things about Anfal and Haladja campaign. I mean, when we talk about this genocide and the 1948 United Nations Convention and the definition of genocide, and we all agree that Anfal and Haladja falls under the same definition. My question is whether, I mean, who would decide whether it was a genocide or not? Because we now, the Kurdish community and the KRG and all the Kurds now are busy urging our friends in Europe and America to urge their parliament, their Congress, their government and administration to recognize this crime being genocide. So when we reach a stage where there will be a real implication of this decision, of this recognition, do we have to do that through this route that we are now following through the governments, or would it be better to go to UN straight if we succeed in making some European and even American government to admit that or recognize this as a genocide? What are the actual implications? What are the benefits other than stopping the perpetrators of thinking of committing the same crime again anywhere in the world, for the Kurds, for the survivors, for the victims? What are the benefits and implications of such recognition, please?
Well, yeah, what you're discussing is a politically charged question. There's a legal dimension to genocide as a crime. And when you're talking about the legal dimension, you're talking about usually convincing one person, a judge, in a courtroom, that genocide happened. And then you make all your legal arguments like I made this morning, and the defense makes theirs, and the judge decides. Like in the Dutch case of Van Herat, a Dutch businessman who supplied chemical weapons to Saddam that he turned into mustard gas and sarin and then used during the Anfals. You know, the Dutch judge decided this was genocide. One man decided, the legal definition. The political implication, for the political dimension of genocide, you need to convince a wider array of people, legislatures, parliaments, congresses, governments, that genocide happened. And then you can have perhaps, reparations for genocide, like the KRG has sought in their discussions with Baghdad and others. And so the political side and the legal side are separate, but they're linked. And oftentimes one pushes the other one way or one direction or another. A great example of this is the question of whether or not the massacre of the Darfur people in Sudan was genocide. Because once you apply the label genocide, then there's a recognition something must be done. We can't just leave it if it's not genocide. And what you saw in Darfur was this went back and forth. The Americans, Secretary of State Colin Powell called it genocide in Darfur, Sudan. The United Nations sent a special team down to investigate under Antonio Cassese, a famous Italian international criminal law jurist. He decided it was not genocide. It was crimes against humanity and war crimes. It didn't quite rise to that level because of the intent. And so there was a standoff between the United Nations and the Americans as to whether that was genocide. We decided to go ahead and throw it over, the Security Council decided to throw it over to the Permanent International Criminal Court to decide whether it was genocide. And after 3 or 4 decisions back and forth between the trial chamber and the appellate chamber judges, they finally said, okay, yes, it's genocide. But this took years because of the political nature of affixing a label to something, and then, of course, the legal implications of that happening. So they're separate, but they're linked. Ultimately, it took a court to decide, even though 2 political teams came out with different definitions. So for each genocide, it's difficult. For each genocide, it's difficult. The Kurdish genocide and getting it recognized is going to be different from the Cambodian genocide or the Sudan genocide or the Holocaust or the Armenian genocide. The Armenians are still very actively trying to get their genocide recognized. The French National Assembly recognized it a few years ago. There were implications to that. There was trade cut off by the Turkish government in response. And you're going to see the same dynamics play out, I think, wherever you go. But you have to keep trying because it builds pressure. It builds pressure for recognition. And, you know, for people who are leaders in the NGO community, the non-governmental organization community, like my colleague here, she can speak to how effective that pressure, I think, can be.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I want to acknowledge Mr. Saleh. I had heard about you. We're honored that you're here.
Thank you.
When did you find out you were a Kurd? What are you studying in college? And what are your hopes for the future?
Actually, when I was 3 years old in Iran, my Iranian mother talked to a psychologist about my situation, and the psychologist told her that he will understand that he is not your own child. So it's better to say him his story step by step. And when I was almost 5 years old, I knew the story. But because I was in a family, and my Iranian mother did not differentiate between me and her own sons. That's why I didn't have much problem in my earlier life. And about my studying, I am studying IT computer in the American University of Iraq. And my hope for future, I hope to have a peaceful life in Kurdistan. And as I say, I don't want the repetition of bombardment or genocide against Kurdish people. I want to have a peaceful life in my future. Our family was in a village, and we didn't know politics. We were not politicians, but politics destroy our life. We don't want to involve in politics, but we don't want politics to involve in our life and destroy our lives. So the sole things that I want for my future is a peaceful life.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Can Oğuz. I'm a counselor at the Turkish Embassy, and I think I'm the only embassy representative here, except the Iraq Embassy, which is from the region, from the regional countries. So I would like to thank you, thank RG for very much for extending the invitation. We are attending all these commemoration events. And Turkey, as you may know, the history between Turkey and Iraq, we also feel the pain of our Iraqi Kurdish brothers, what they went through. And at the time, we did our best to help them out. And today, we have an excellent relationship with the Iraqi Kurds, and Turkey is ready to extend any help and to do its best to avoid and prevent the repetition or recurrence of such events in the region, because this region has suffered a lot, and our region suffers better, our people suffer, our region deserves better, and our peoples deserve better. I just wanted to say my feelings, on this occasion, and also register my disagreement with Dr. Kelly. This is an event about Haladja, disagreement about his characterization of events that happened at the turn of 20th century. This is another issue of discussion, and I would be happy to talk with Dr. Kelly, on other occasion, but, on this occasion, I just wanted to register that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm from Temple University, the Dialogue Institute. We came to show our solidarity and our relationship to the suffering of the Kurdish people and of the commemoration of the 25th anniversary. We have the privilege of working with young members of the Kurdish community and others that want to do the documentation alongside you, Ali, and they are here too, and they brought the survivors with them. I think that, Dr. Kelly, what we're most interested in, and also to you at Catholic University, is maybe rather than partisan activity separate from one another, should be a coalition of those communities and universities and others that want this to be not only memorialized, but also to be remembered in all history, but also active legislation, because there still is many medical and legal and other reasons to pursue this, as well as documentation. So what I'd like to ask you is to give us, those of us leaving the room now, from everybody's perspective, what should happen now for each of us. You've got the members of the Kurdish community here from America. You have academics from around the world, from around the country. You have different religious movements. You have NGOs. Now let's get a mandate. What happens for the next 25 years? So we're not just coming to commemorations, but we're actually seeing this as far as integrated into museums, into our art, into our culture, into the legacy of the human experience, the human history.
Can I respond?
When you want to start? Go ahead.
Can I respond?
Yes, please.
That's actually a question that I answer on a daily basis to a number of different groups. Yeah, is this on?
Yeah, it's on.
Sure, or something.
Yeah. There you go.
Can you hear me a little better now? Okay, thank you so much. I'm sorry? Okay. That is a question that I answer on almost a daily basis. The first step is the voices. And clearly you're passionate in support of bringing the voices forth first. When there is an ethnic representation, the spokespersons, those who can say, look, this is what happened to us, we were there, I felt it, I'm still feeling it, I'm still seeing it. This is the message that we want to get across. That's a priority, at least in our approach. The second is, okay, who are the organizations that, the ethnic organizations that can work together, whether they're also Kurdish or not, whether they're also Iraqi or not. So for example, in terms of the genocide against the Kurds, it's a tipping point, because like in the case of Iran, just to kind of move the controversy over there, clearly there's a very diverse community of Iranians. There's Ahwads, there's Kurds, there's Azeri. There's a whole bunch of genocide happening to lots of different people, Baha'i. So in recognizing the Kurds, if that can be legitimized finally, then that's a positive step for other communities and other surrounding countries. And I think that also bringing forth the Kurdish issue can raise the difference between peace-loving Kurds and folks like the PKK or the PJAK or PYD, who are not necessarily representative, even though they have a very strong voice. And it's really crucial, because when it's important to know who you're actually defending. Once those kind of central folks are identified and supported, and folks know that they can at least come to the table together or be just have discussions as individuals, then it's a matter of the academia coalition, the institute coalition, the American or Western organizations that can advocate and further the issues in law, and say, okay, look, this is the case, here's the procedure, we know this policymaker, we know this advocate, what have you. And then there's a whole level of lobby, which is missing. The energy sector has a huge lobby. Some of the energy sector are in support of the people. Some of them, they just want to do their own thing. But it's important for the people to have an equal lobby so that they can reach folks like Hollande or Secretary Kerry or the White House or otherwise and say, look, we don't want to have continued conflict between the Kurdish region and the Iraq side. Clearly there's a medical need on the Kurdish side. There's also medical deficiencies on the Iraq side. We want services for everyone. So there's a lot of different developmental approaches that can happen as long as the people's voice and interests are first, and then the advice comes second, and then it's implemented third.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, I think the KRG is doing some of this right now. I mean, you look at the office we have here with Carwan and Michelle, you know, leading the charge in Washington, D.C., educating Americans about Kurdistan. And they do a great job. I mean, I suppose we should recognize you.
Indeed.
But just like Bob said, people don't know where Kurdistan is. They don't know who Kurds are. So why should they care that there was a genocide against the Kurds? You have to educate people about where Kurdistan is. I mean, I remember, you know, when I was a 20-year-old student at Indiana University, and my professor told me, oh, there's a population of 30 million people the size of France that don't have a state. Suddenly I became interested. How could this be? And once you become interested in the story of Kurdistan, then you become interested in the story of the genocide. I think one leads the other. Although you seem to be disagreeing with me.
I do the opposite. Genocide, then you won't find out who the people are. But I don't have 1, 2, 3, 4. Who do we write to? What would Kurdish people here in the community that say, we want to get active, what do we need to do? What actually is happening on the ground? Is there petitions? Is there lobbies? What's happening with the Congress at this point now? What's happening now with actual more commemoration events around the community? There's a film that will be out, hopefully you'll announce it this afternoon, those who can go this afternoon to see the film, but how do we get that film around for people to see? There's lots of actual to-do once you...
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's an intensive PR and strategic effort. Strategic plans can be made and implemented. It's an answer that can be... I'll give you my card, and we can talk about it, and I can provide it to you.
Perry Karadagi with Kurdish Human Rights Watch. We have been doing, we were founded actually because of the Anfal and Haladja events. We have been doing the advocacy work, recognizing and bringing the atrocities of the voiceless. Khushkubrani Haladja Bakhair bin. We forget the power of the Kurdish American community in the United States and what they do in regards to talking to their representatives and holding memorials. For the past 25 years, the Kurdish American community have been holding events to honor people like yourself. احترام بو إيوة وبو خلقي هلبجة وبو أوانيك لأنفالك وجران. We will remain working on these issues, and we will continue, having been worked myself for 22 years with this organization and working also in Kurdistan with the help of KRG in helping renovate villages, working with victims, doing leadership development for women. We have found a very good partner in KRG in implementing these operations. And please reassure what would you like to see us do outside Kurdi Ameriki, Kurdish Americans and American population do to help you?
Actually, I want the Kurdish community to be active. Like you are in US and you can have the power to convince people to recognize Haladja and Anfal as genocide. As professors say that first of all, people need to know about Kurdistan, and that's your duty. And that's your duty to introduce Kurdistan and Kurdish people to the world and to your community. And that's that's what I want the Kurdish community in US to do. And our main concern is to have different parliaments to recognize Haladja and Anfal as genocide. And your duty here is to introduce Kurdistan to American people and how we are. Just explain them how we are. The Arabs kill many of us, and we call them Arabs brothers. Just explain them. Explain American people who we are. Yep.
Yes, and if I can add as well that when Ali said, I'd like to have a peaceful life, I think that American communities can do a lot. I mean, one of the things that we did when we sent the delegation that was led by Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, who was supposed to be here but had to go work on the election of the new Pope. And he sent his regrets and his greetings to all of you. But the delegation that went spanned the spectrum of American Christian communities. And to a person, when they came back, they said, this is a success story. The Kurdistan is a region that people need to know about. And we had people we had Cardinal McCarrick, we had Canon Jim Kowalski of St. John the Divine, we had Larry Ross, who's one of the leading evangelicals in the United States. All of them said, there's a story here. There's an ancient history here. And more importantly, they said, there's a future here. And Ali is part of that future. So for the communities in the United States who really don't know the history, of course we should teach it to them. But I think the most practical thing I could suggest to you today is make sure you sign the mailing list so that we know who you are and we can be in touch with you and stay in touch with you, because together we can do a lot. Okay, so I know there's other questions. Yes?
I think it's wonderful that we're commemorating a massacre and we're trying to remember all the victims, but I think one step that we can do to move forward, and hopefully the panelists can answer this for me, there is in Turkey, and I think it's wonderful that we have a Turkish representative here, the undermining of human rights of Kurds in Turkey is a major issue that hasn't been mentioned here, and is there something that the panelists can suggest that we can do as activists of human rights for the Kurds in Turkey? Thank you.
Can I respond to that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, please.
Okay. As I mentioned, my work is in Iran, Syria, and Iraq. And Turkey right now is actually doing a tremendous amount on the Syria cause. And they are right alongside KRG in the same effort with regards to refugees. I think we just passed the 1 million mark on Syrian refugees. Clearly, yeah, there's conflict with regards to the Kurdish issue in Turkey. As far as the Syrians who I work with, both Syrian Kurds and the seculars, they are not really happy with the PKK. They're not happy with PYD, and PJAK is a whole other story. But, you know, we're looking at peace in Syrian Kurdistan, a new Syrian Kurdistan, that would promote peace for Turkey and would promote the furthering of peace for Iraq and Iran. So that by a culmination of my work with Iranian Kurds, Iraqi Kurds in both charitable and economic development, and with Syrian Kurds, Syrians, Iranians, that there would be nonviolent diplomatic means. You know, it's kind of one of those domino effect things. So not that we don't care, just it's a regional issue.
Yes, it's regional, and again, the point being that that the economic opportunities in the region are so great that if we can get people kind of getting the tide lifting all the boats, then, you know, people kind of, some of those things, people, even if you look in the in Palestine, you will find that the most peaceful areas of Palestine are those where people have jobs because they're too busy taking care of their families to go make trouble. So, I mean, that's the piece of this that why I say when we need to give people like Ali opportunities to use that knowledge that he's acquiring and all of his classmates so that they can build that peaceful future for the whole region. Okay, yes?
First of all, I will not necessarily offer a job, then his human rights will be protected.
No, that's completely true.
It's about abusing human rights. And
of course.
A nation's human right, a personal human right. We are not talking about because they are jobless, that's why their human rights being
That's not what I said.
violated. I mean,
That's not what I meant.
and when we talk about these things, I mean, I'm not from Turkey, not from Syria, I'm from Iraq and from Kurdistan of Iraq.
Right.
But when you mention someone that don't like PKK, don't like Jack, there are millions of people who like them at the same time.
Absolutely.
It's not that me like or dislike, but you must be, I mean, when you talk about things like this, you have to be more, I mean, balanced in this way. There are people who like PKK, there are people who hate PKK, there are people who like Turkish government, people hate Turkish government.
Absolutely.
And when we talk about human rights violation, we are not talking about just offering opportunity for job and maybe economic development is one of the good things, the good steps to make people, make communities get closer to each other, but this is not the only solution or the only step.
Absolutely.
Can I respond to that with a little on DC? Secretary Kerry, my understanding from one of my partners who's known him for over 30 years, his diplomacy is based a lot on economics. That if there are economic development opportunities to promote the stabilization of a country, and if the U.S. can help in that, whether it's OPEC financing development of hospitals, which is something that we want to do in Kurdistan, and I'm not shy about it, then that's something that promotes positive relations. Getting people jobs, sure. You can have a job as a doctor. You can have a job as a construction worker building that hospital. I think there's a big difference between exploiting a people for money and using more corporate social responsibility in the course of that development. That said, I totally understand what you're saying about PKK and PYD, and I hear that from the ground all the time. A lot of people are very happy with the defense and the protection that's being provided. However, my concern is Iran. My concern is the use of the PKK and the PYD as the eyes of the Iranian regime, and I'm not really interested in what the regime wants. So I'm kind of cold about it. Sorry.
Yes, sir.
My name is Majid Sayegh, currently from Philadelphia, and here with the Dialogue Institute folks. But I was born and grew up in Mosul, Iraq, left over 35 years ago. Went back for the first time in September of 2012 to Erbil, Slemania, and the region. And as you mentioned, many good things are happening there. The construction, the development, incredible economic progress. I wanted to respond to this issue about what can we do and how do we address the issue of the day, the Kurdish genocide and human rights. I think if there's something that I want to take away from today, and I hope each of you can think of this, is that we need to work for the promotion of human rights of everyone in the region, the Kurds, whether they're Iraqi Kurds or Turkish Kurds or Iranian Kurds, the Arabs, the Jews, the Christians, the Muslims, the Yazidis. We need to respect all and work for human rights for all. And I think we can agree on that.
Amen.
Okay, we have just about 5 more minutes for questions, and then we have to move on. So yes, here's the next question, and then there's questions behind you.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for the panel member answering our question. I would like to have one of the panel member from KRG office as well, if they can answer my question. As I've been in the United States for 15 years, I know everything. If you want to push it up and to be recognized, it's about economy. You have to have the resources and be able to talk around people. May I know, as a Kurd, a simple Kurd, if I know my issue, or what's big cases to be acknowledged by U.S. people, what kind of resource or program by KRG would be provided to us as a Kurds to be able to go around and talk to people, because we have to have a resource and program to direct to people. I mean, you just don't want to get an emphasis from people. You want to have, kind of some solid document to tell them. But since the the Kurdish government, they have their own budget, I'm sure they can be able to help us out as a Kurds here. They can implement the program through so many different programs for Kurds.
Well, that requires financial resources.
Right, they do have financial resources. I mean, it's everything is blooming in Kurdistan. They have their resources, budgets, everything. It would be very good for the Kurds. So many Kurds live in Virginia, for instance, or Washington.
Sure. But I think within Iraq, the dialogue between Erbil and Baghdad, it needs to get back on track. There's been sort of a animus between the two that has prevented constructive constitutional dialogue. If you look at the Iraqi constitution and the Kurdish regional constitution side by side, you'll see that there's a very real chance that the Kurdistan region will be able to assert economic control over oil and gas development. And if that happens, then the KRG will be in a position, I think, to develop cultural centers, Kurdish cultural centers around the world and around North America to help get out the message you're talking about and leverage those populations that are already here like you, who've been here for 15 years, to actually do some programming and some creative outreach, with the help of the local KRG offices. But that constitutional dialogue needs to take place for that economic renaissance to happen beyond the Kurdistan region, and they can export it, I think. That's a political question that needs to be dealt with by, I suppose, President Barzani and Prime Minister Maliki.
Right. Okay, we have time for one more question. So right behind you.
I am Salahuddin Bayezidi, a representative of Komala Party of Iranian Kurdistan to the United States. While we honoring the victims of Haladja Anfal and the horrendous crime happened, I just want to attention the people here. At the same time, the Kurdish city in Iran was chemical attacked by Iraqi government, the Kurdish city of Sardash. Over 200 people killed and 1,000 been injured and suffered. Many spots and many cities in Iranian Kurdistan been attacked chemical. At the same time, for the last 30 years, Kurdish people in Iran been suffered against the genocide by Iranian government. Many villages, many cities, and just city of the Mahabat been attacked for 20 days and 3,000 people killed in those periods. And people even could not pick up the people who killed in their house. At the same time, right now, we every day see the people trafficking because as a result of Iranian policies, the people have no job, have no money, daily be killed. And recently, over 50 people, civil activists and journalists been arrested by Iranian government, and many people, over 100, are on death row and Iranian prison. While we're hoping what happened in Haladja and what happened in Fall is the past, I think the international community and the people, media and the U.S. should pay attention. Is something very worse can happen in Iranian Kurdistan. I think this is really real, and it can happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What I'd like to do now is ask our other two speakers to come up. Dr. Saeed and Cantor Goldberg, would you please come up, and we'll continue with the program. Thank you very much for your participation.
Very much. It's nice to serve you.
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to do the
cars ready. Okay, fantastic.
Bob,
I'm going to go catch my driver.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right,
Wonderful event.
Thank you. Thank you. Then we're done. Yeah. I'll let you close.
So far, so good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joaquin. Appreciate it.
Okay, can we get everybody's attention, please? Because we're not finished yet. Can I get your attention? We're not finished yet. We have a couple more,
Welcome. How are you?
Actually, we need to keep the program moving here to get people out on time. So if you can just hold on for a couple more minutes, it's not going to take too much longer. Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for your continued attention. The next person I'd like to introduce is Cantor Gus Goldberger. He's a retired attorney and has been a cantor for quite a few years. One of the untold stories of Kurdistan is the diaspora of its Jewish community. And I know that during the time of Saddam, there were many Jews who came back to Turkey, who went to Turkey to look out over their ancestral homeland and cry. And so it's a great honor for me to introduce Cantor Gus Goldberg, who will recite the Jewish prayer for the dead, the Kaddish.
Thank you very much, Bob. This reminds me of law school many, many years ago. And I'm enjoying it immensely, especially also because this is the first time I'm exposed to this entire group that is in front of me. And I might say that, with your permission, I will contradict you. Rather than 5 survivors, there are 6 survivors. I happen to be a survivor from Denmark. In 1943, I was 9 years old when we escaped from Denmark to Sweden. That's another story. I'm not here for that. At this time, I will say a prayer in Hebrew and very quickly interpret it in English. Yiskadal v'yiskadashemei rabo Be'olmo divrach Yerusei v'yamlich machusei B'chayechom niyomechon v'chayrechol beis Yisroel Ba'golo v'izman kori v'meru amen Yesh mei rabo mevorach leol meol mayo Yisporach v'yishtabach v'yispor v'yisromam v'yisnasei V'yishadar v'yishal v'yisalo shemedi Kurdish b'richu Leilo min kol b'irchoso v'shiroso tushb'choso v'nechmoso Damiron v'yolmo v'yimeru amen Yehi Shalom Rabba Mishmai v'chaim Oleinu v'Kol Yisrael v'yimeru amen. Yehi Shalom Rabba Mishmai v'chaim Oleinu v'Kol Yisrael v'yimeru amen. Oseh Shalom Yivamav Yaseh Shalom Oleinu v'Kol Yisrael v'yimeru amen. Extolled and hallowed be the name of God throughout the world, which He has created. May His kingdom be established in your lifetime and in the lifetime of the entire world, speedily and without delay. May His omnipotent name be praised, glorified, extolled, magnified, honored, and most excellently adored, in words far surpassing all hymns, praises, and eulogies that can be expressed in the world. May abundance of peace and happy life be bestowed upon all of us. May He who establishes peace in His high heavens grant, through His mercy, peace to us and to the entire world. And let us say Amen. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our last speaker before I turn the podium back over to Najat is Dr. Saeed Saeed, the National Director for the Office of Interfaith and Community Alliance for the Islamic Society of North America, who will honor the survivors visiting from the Kurdistan region. Dr. Saeed?
Yeah,
thank you for coming.
Greetings of peace and Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to US. You know that by now this is our 50th anniversary of the Islamic Society of North America. That means an organized community emerged during the last 50 years. When we started this work in America, we had hardly 5 or 6 mosques. During these 50 years, we have built from 2,000 to 3,000 mosques in this country. And this great possibility, it was possible because we had Muslims coming from everywhere here and actively involved in creating a respectable, dignified Islamic presence in this country. And I was involved, I was one of the founders. So when I go from mosque to mosque, from California to New York Island, in every city, I see a good number of Kurdish Muslims involved in building an Islamic presence in America. We are proud of that. Many of these Kurds have provided leadership. They have provided vision and understanding, living in a pluralist world, interacting with Christians and Jews and people of other faiths. They have given us that vibrant understanding, and they are committed and dedicated to the American democracy and pluralism. So that's why our message is a message of hope. Our message is a message of respect. And today, you know that this is our 3rd and 4th generation that have been born in America. My sons and daughters, and now we see their sons and daughters. Our sons and daughters, that is Kurdish sons and daughters, are marrying not just Arab sons and daughters, they are marrying Turkish sons and daughters, they are marrying Arab sons and daughters, Egyptian, Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi. It has created a new entity, a new identity. When in 1988, my daughter, who was in University of Maryland, and later she won the Democratic primaries, so she found a beautiful young Muslim from Kurdistan, from Barzanj. So they got married. So it was the same year when we were saddened about the death and destruction in Haladja. That was also the year we were laying foundation of a new family, getting a Kurdish Muslim married to an emerging American Muslim leader. Both of them are working intensively, educating, training Muslims from Morocco to Indonesia. My daughter is a senior advisor to Obama in introducing the religious element that is bringing Islam and Muslims in different countries to be part and parcel of this. That's why our commitment is to human dignity and human rights. Wherever they are violated, we are not going to compromise. We have benefited from this environment where we are. We are not a minority, because if we were a minority, then we would not have 2 members of Congress in American Congress, because we are in a small number. The 2 Muslim congressmen in America were not elected by Muslims. They were elected by Christians and Jews. So in that sense, we have a sense of pride that we are part and parcel of this vibrant society in America. And that is the message, wherever we are, to our brothers and sisters in different lands. So when I took a couple of years back a delegation of imams to Poland and Germany to visit the Holocaust sites where Hitler destroyed the large number of Jews in those, that killing machine of Hitler. So these imams, they were, you can imagine, with all the propaganda going around, they are human. Quran teaches them compassion. They were crying. And together, when I was there standing, I said, I recited the Quranic verse, you remember that? لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. That God has created human beings in the best of the molds. But then what happens? What happens is, ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. That the same human beings can degenerate, lowest of the low. And they can commit genocide that we see, whether it was by Nazis, whether it was by Saddam Hussein, or whether it is going on in Syria today. So Quran has given us that understanding that human beings are likely to lose that dignity, to lose that humanness. And that's why our prayer is that we should be able to institutionalize compassion, create an environment where everybody feels empowered. You remember that in the history of Islam, we used to have zimmis, we used to have protected minorities, Christians and Jews. But that was in the past. Today, the Islamic vision is not zimmitude. Today, the Islamic vision is wherever we are. We are ordained by Quran and the example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to create an environment where everybody feels dignified, where Christians and Jews are equally involved in shaping a society. That's why today when some of our Muslim countries are experimenting with democracy, like say Egypt, for example, Morocco, Tunisia, and other countries, we tell them our example, that you cannot treat Christians and Jews or other minorities as separate minorities and feel good that they are practicing their religion. It's not just practicing of religion. It is a full-fledged involvement in shaping a nation and being equally counted in that sense. So the verse of the Quran that I am going to conclude with. But before that, I want to tell you that there are several things that you should keep in mind. That our presence in America has resulted in a collective work that we are doing. Every year we have a convention of the Islamic Society of North America that brings together 40,000 to 50,000 Muslims for 4 days. This year it will be during September, Labor Day weekend. It will be in Washington, D.C. I'm asking Caravan to arrange the invitation to these survivors there so that the rest of the Muslim community also sees them. You should have a booth there so that it is an education to all those Muslims to understand, because it's not only the Haladja. We want to make sure that it does not happen again. So it's amazing. Many of you must have read this ayah that I will be reciting. This is the famous ayah. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهُ ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا تَتَنَزَّلُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ أَلَّا تَخَافُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا وَابْشِرُوا بِالْجَنَّةِ الَّتِي كُنْتُمْ تُوعَدُونَ نَحْنُ أَوْلِيَاؤُكُمْ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ وَلَكُمْ فِيهَا مَا تَشْتَهِي أَنفُسُكُمْ وَلَكُمْ فِيهَا مَا تَدَّعُونَ. Then I come to وَلَا تَسْتَوِي الْحَسَنَةَ وَلَا السَّيِّئَةَ. Evil and good, they cannot be equated. If someone has done evil to you, you don't reciprocate by giving evil. So as Muslims, as believers, we are commanded by God to do what? That idfa billati hi ahsan, that you should do good in return. And then فَإِذَا الَّذِي بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَهُ عَدَاوَةٌ, and those with whom you have ingrained that malice, that animosity, who knows, كَأَنَّهُ وَلِيٌّ حَمِيمٌ, that ultimately they may turn out to be your supporters, to be your close allies. Now you must have read it many times. I have read it many times. But I want to tell you where I saw it recently. And that is a lesson for you and me also. That is in Srebrenica, in Bosnia. Srebrenica is a city where 8,000 Muslims were massacred, right? So there are the graves there spread all over. You can imagine if you are looking like this, so for acres and acres, and there are 8,000 graves of people who were decimated by the people, by these by the Serbs and others. So the edict that they have there, the memorial they have there, do you know what is written on this memorial? It is this verse. And imagine now you have the people they are visiting sometimes, whose fathers and mothers and sons and daughters are buried there. And suddenly they remember, these are Muslims who are coming even from here. They go from St. Louis, they go from different cities here, they go to visit Srebrenica. And when the Muslims go there and they read this, on the one hand, their hearts are full of that frustration, that negativity and pain, and yet they are reminded of this Quranic verse. What is that Quranic verse? La tastawi al-hasanata wala sayyi'ah. That evil and goodness cannot be equated. People have done evil to you, but don't have the same kind of that malice in your hearts. Then, idfa billati hiya ahsan. So it demands from the Muslims, the survivors, that you should think of providing and reciprocating in a positive way. For izalladhi bainaka wa bainahu adawa, that the people against whom you have that sense of animosity, ka'annahu waliyun hamim, that they may become ultimately your best allies in rebuilding, in creating a new future, in bringing together a vision that is best for everyone. So we will conclude this with the prayer to asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we have suffered in every land. We have had centuries of oppression, either by colonial powers or by our own people whose names were Muslims. And today we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open our hearts and minds and exactly do what the Prophet used to ask. He would say, Allahumma arina al-haqq haqqan warzuqna ittiba'ahu. Ya Allah, show us the truth, because sometimes truth in the Muslim world by conspiracy theories is so distorted, it's very difficult for people to understand what is truth and what is falsehood, because everybody is using the text and the scripture. Allahumma arina al-batila batilan warzuqna ijtinabu. Ya Allah, show us the falsehood as falsehood so that we will avoid it. So that is my message, that's my prayer, that's why we want to work together. So, best wishes. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
All right, and now our co-host Najat Abdallah will close, and we want to thank you also for coming. So Najat.
Thank you very much. Can I invite the survivors here? Thank you.
Can you share the pictures with us? Of course. Okay.
Once again, I want to special thank to you all for showing up today, and to our speakers and also our hosts, and special thank to our survivors. Without them, without their support and commitment and care, this program would not have been possible. Thank you very much for traveling all the way from Haladja. And I also want to inform you about the important event this evening is coming up. Screen a film about, the title is Haladja, the Lost Children, directed by our special guest, Akram Hido. He's standing there. And thanks for coming, Mr. Hido. We're grateful to have you here. And the film is screening at Jewish Community Center. It's right across our KRG headquarters, and we would love to have you there at evening as well. Once again, thank you very much for showing up. Thank you. Thank you.